Hello and welcome back to the Bright Founders Talk podcast from Temy. Temy is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. My name is Chris, and today's guest is someone who has a real knack for business with over 10 years of experience now working as a COO for the very successful OneLocal. Olivier Thibault. I said it wrong, didn't I?
Thibault, but it's
Thibault, sorry. Olivier Thibault. Apologies. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
pretty good. Yourself?
Very good. Thank you very much. So the quick 5 questions like we always ask. The first one, what makes a good boss, in your opinion?
I think it all starts from empathy, the reality of not working with robots, not working for robots.
Okay, just sort of understanding different types of people and that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. What do you do to unwind after a busy day?
Walking the dog, listening to a podcast, or cooking.
Oh, nice. You live sort of in a rural area or more sort of downtown?
Downtown Montreal,
okay.
in Canada, yeah.
But I imagine there's a lot of nice places to walk then, Montreal.
Oh, absolutely. Lots of parks here.
Brilliant. All right, nice. And what did you want to be growing up?
Back when I was a kid, I wanted to be a scientist. I had a microscope once for Christmas and led me to do all the way to my pre-med until I ended up going to business school. Yeah.
Oh, well, okay. Brilliant. Well, just touching on what you just mentioned there. So you studied business administration and I just wanted to know, like, did you have an idea of where you wanted to go in the future, your vision, let's say, or was it just something you thought, okay, that'll be good in the future?
Not really. I was quite opportunistic. And I think that this has led me to try a lot of different things until I found really where I was able to thrive and be really excited by my work. So I studied, in business school, a fairly general program, graduated with a couple majors in IT and management, which led me to working for a big corporation, Fortune 100 company, doing IT project management there. Wasn't my forte. It wasn't where I was thriving the most, which has led me to leave, try a few different things, started working for startups. And now at OneLocal, it's been 4 different startups I've been working with over the last 10 plus years. And I feel like I've found that exactly what I was looking for after all this time.
No, brilliant. Okay, good to hear. I think some of the criticism about universities sometimes is it doesn't really give you the skills to jump into the world of work. How did you feel with what you studied? Was it an easy transfer into working?
Absolutely. And my university was a bit peculiar where we had the opportunity of working with a broad range of organizations through student engagement. So that led me to be exposed to a few different things, but I would still agree with you that it may not be as hands-on as some universities that have robust co-op programs. I think that today, more than ever, a student in university can run a business on the side, a Shopify e-commerce platform, and potentially they may learn as much or even more than they can in their classes by doing that.
Do you think you would have done that if those things were around at that time? Do you think you would have?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I was running an e-commerce
you were?
clothing company, streetwear, just a few years ago while I was working as the head of HR at my previous startup, which is Care. And although that was extremely demanding, working for a startup full-time, that's like doubling every 8 months, I still found it to be complementary. So sometimes when the work is a little bit more demanding or brings you a bit down, you have something else going on for you. And I, from what I hear in interviews with a lot of more recent grads, it sounds like a lot of them picked up some side businesses on the side, especially during COVID.
Wow. Okay. In your terms, it sounds like you're quite interested in startups. Is there something special about working with startups compared to other, sort of more established companies?
I think so. And there's a pros and cons to that, right? So when you're a startup, right now at OneLocal, we're fewer than 100 people, which means that you have more impact than if you were for a 100,000 people organization. The other thing is that you can be very close to management. You can be very close to having a broader range of duties. That being said, it also comes with additional responsibilities. So the way I see it, and that's a bit cliche, but we look at the company as a successful sport team. So whether you want to win, the Stanley Cup or any other trophy out there, the only way to do this is by building a successful team where everyone rows in the same direction. And so the startup comes with that additional pressure. There's not really any blind spot for people to hide. Everyone needs to contribute. And every once in a while, you need to go above and beyond. But the reality of building a startup is that if you push people too far, you start losing your best elements. And that actually will slow you down in the long term. So you have to thread that needle. But typically it involves finding the right people in the first place, and then being very transparent about the expectations and making sure that we're tracking according to plan. But building a startup is always ups and downs. There's no such thing as like an upward infinite trajectory. And the ones that had that because they were raising billions of dollars kind of started getting the reckoning in 2023. And we're going to see more of those kind of hit a wall in the upcoming months, I think.
Well, it sounds exciting despite the downs sometimes, but it sounds very cool. Talking about your sort of the beginnings of your career, what was that like then? Because you were doing you were in IT, right? IT,
correct?
And
yes,
how did you find that then? Was it did you learn any skills that you still use today in those beginning jobs, or not really?
Absolutely. I think that there's a lot I took with me when I left my corporate job. Resilience, political skills. When you work for a fairly large organization, things are a bit more complicated than when you're in a startup and your boss just tells you to go all speed ahead. Handling budgets and a few other elements like this. And the way I see it, in our 30+ year career, we'll have a lot of jobs. It's very likely that I'm not going to retire from OneLocal 30 years from now, but younger generation will be able to experience more different kinds of work. And, if someone is trying corporate and it's for them, then that's excellent. There's stability with corporate jobs. Your job doesn't change every 3 months, and it may be the right fit. But for other people, when you're still hungry and when you feel like you're missing on something, then maybe an environment that's a little bit more ambiguous, a bit more chaotic, like a startup that's constantly changing, maybe a better fit. And there's a lot of different cultures out there. People can just pick and choose what seems to align with their personalities and who they are. So
do you think that from your experience, that idea of changing jobs has become normalized compared to the past, where people would, sort of stay in a job for at least 10 years because they thought it'd look bad on their CV? Do you think now it's not really, doesn't have any negative effect if you move around a little bit?
I mean, at 26, I had more jobs than both my parents together, right? And today there's even a few more lines on my resume, right? And so the way we look at it on the recruiting side is, if you've occupied a single position in the last 10 years, I want to understand how your job changed on a regular basis. I want to understand what new challenges you were facing. When you move every 3 to 4 years and you bring a track record with you and some learnings, then there's some cross-pollination that naturally happens. And I think there's value in that. On our end, we have people on the team that have been at OneLocal for 10 years. We have other people that just joined a few weeks ago, and that creates the diversity that we're looking for. There's value in switching, there's value in staying, as long as you do it for the right reasons.
What was it like stepping into the managerial roles? I think it was, development and project manager, for example. What was that like? Sort of, I imagine it must be sort of a different shift from employee to manager, right?
Yeah, and so in my initial part of my career as a project manager, I wasn't directly managing anyone. I was working with developers. It's when I ended up working for my first startup that was bringing tech to retail that I ended up managing a small team. That was quite exciting. And so over time, when I joined Aliker as employee, something like number 20, I had a small team of recruiters and HR generalists. Here at OneLocal, I've been responsible for different departments, whether it's security, finance, people, implementation, support, and so on. But yeah, switching context is something that I'm still learning to polish over time, but it's something that I think is also keeping me excited, engaged, gives me the ability to learn. And I think that I'm also able to bring different areas of what I've learned in one part to the others.
In terms of, in that position, I know you said you didn't manage anyone, but later on, I suppose, also now you do. Do you have a particular style of management, or do you kind of read people and change and adapt to depending on, is it the carrot or the stick? Kind of, I'm sure there are other ways, but.
Yeah, that's a great question. So before an offer is sent to anyone who's going to directly work with me, we have a bit of a chat, and I try to be as upfront and transparent as possible. And the way I frame it is that I only want to work with adults. And that means that I can be very upfront and transparent about my expectations, how I work. I always tell my future team members that I'm not a micromanager, but I can be if I have to. And so I believe in working with professionals. I believe in having people manage up. And this leads to the right people being excited and the not so right people self-selecting out, which I've been using over the years. But I would, if you were to ask someone on my team right now, probably anonymously, they would probably say that I'm quite demanding, but I'm also supporting. We have very ambitious goals. A lot of the company's success is resting on our shoulders, and if we deliver, we can build the next Canadian unicorn potentially. And if we don't, then we're going to have some very hard decisions to make here. So I'm super excited for what we have to build, but there's also the responsibility that comes with it.
With you guys at the moment at OneLocal, have you accepted the hybrid model of working from home sometimes? And again, are you sort of quite trusting with, I know it's obviously, you're saying it's still fairly small in terms of numbers. So is it easier to kind of let people go away and work, and you can just be okay, I trust you basically?
Yeah, and the answer is 100%. So ever since COVID, the team went fully remote.
Oh.
I am 500 kilometers from our CEO. I'm 5,000 kilometers from our CTO, but we still work well together. So my team is in 5 different countries, and we're able to make this work. And it goes back to the point of working with adults, right? Some people will thrive in an environment where there's a manager looking over their shoulders. That's not my style. That's not how I work. In my previous firm, we had 9 offices around the world by the end of it. And so I always had a few people all over the place. So I think that when you get the right people together and they understand why their contribution matters, you're going to get them to give their best selves. And I don't think that it's like putting them in a cubicle in person that, you end up treating people like robots instead of letting them do what is right. I have people on my team that go walk their dog during lunch, clears their head, they come back even stronger. We are also flexible on the working hours, although we have the core hours where we end up having meetings. But we've embraced the fully remote nature of work. And I think that the firms that are forcing people back to the office, whether it's 3, 4, 5 days a week, are going to have a hard time remaining, keeping the same talent density than a firm like us can.
Yeah, I think it's definitely beneficial in the long term. What countries or what nationalities do you work with then? Because you said in 5 different countries, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are also super flexible with people working from anywhere. I myself travel a bit all the time. But yeah, I have someone who's currently working from Vietnam. We have people in Colombia, Brazil, Argentina, all over Canada. So we're quite distributed.
Are they Canadians or are they Colombians or Argentinians, etc.?
Yeah, the majority of the team is Canadian, but we're also working with international folks.
Okay, I just wondered, what's your advice with working with different nationalities? Do you find it sort of quite easy, or have there been any sort of misunderstandings with culture?
Yeah, we've had some experiments that were not as successful back toward the end of 2020 when we started hiring again. The time zone difference for certain position is quite difficult to address. So whenever you end up with 8+ hours difference, you get a lot of delays potentially with people not working with the same hours or people that are working during the night. So our best success has really been with LATAM. So similar time zones to the Americas, and My colleagues in Argentina are like 2 hours ahead of us. Our colleagues in Colombia are mostly the same time zones, so that's quite convenient. And all over Canada, we're already covering 3 time zones. So apart from that, we've been quite successful at looking at a broader talent pool to pick from, for sure.
When you became a director of people and operations, I read that you grew the team from 20 to 420. And I'm just curious, like, how did you go about that? It seems quite like a big number. So how did you have like a very stern selection process, or was it just quite organic?
So both. At the end of the day, when you're almost doubling your team every few months, you have to leverage as many sources of candidates as possible. So we were very deliberate in ensuring that we were getting good referrals, doing some outreach, having attractive employer branding to get the right people in. At the same time, when you're top 10th percentile startup in terms of growth, your name ends up in the media a little bit, and you end up attracting some talent there too. But yeah, it's a little bit how we got started. Over time, we ended up doing M&A. So we ended up toward the end acquiring our biggest competitor that was a legacy software provider that was over 20 years old. And that allowed us to scale up the team even more.
Can you tell us a little bit about OneLocal now? Like what do you do?
Yeah, so OneLocal, we're kind of like at the intersection of software as a service and digital marketing for small local businesses. So think of a plumber, think of a medical spa. Those small businesses will have very specific digital marketing needs, but they may not have deep enough pockets to hire a full-time marketer or work with a very costly agency that's going to do bespoke work for them. And so the way we look at it is that within the next few years, there's going to be one or a handful of leaders in the market that will do what we do. And we want to be that big unicorn that can service those millions of small businesses all over the Americas. So in the early 2000s, if I wanted to spin up a website, I didn't have access to Squarespace or Wix or all these SaaS providers. I had to get myself a server. I had to get WordPress or build my web pages myself. It was very time consuming. Changing the content broke the pages. It was very difficult to do on my own, and I was a fairly technical guy back then. And so as of now, this has been fairly commodified, but it hasn't yet happened for the digital marketing space as a whole. So there's thousands of software solutions for digital marketers, but it's like you need to get a car to go from point A to point B, and you can buy a steering wheel across the street, and then you can buy a transmission somewhere else, and you need to piece it all together, which is not very user-friendly. So the way OneLocal approaches this is we just show up with a platform that centralizes messaging, phone, reviews, referrals, visits with a booking tool, building the merchants' websites, finding the right keywords for them to rank from an SEO perspective, and also providing the content. And then over time, we also have to ensure that they perform from a digital marketing perspective. So ensuring that they get the reviews that they need, but also that they keep ranking higher with Google all the time. And that is quite an endeavor. So it's quite difficult to crack. The Google algorithm is a black box. It changes hundreds of times a year. And your competitors are also trying new things. So you need to always be one step ahead of them. But on our end, we look at this holistically, and we want to create the outcomes for our merchants by having automation do the work, the heavy lifting in the background, and for us to automatically adjust their configuration in a way that's going to maximize their ranking.
How has OneLocal harnessed AI, or do you also use it in your specific job?
Yeah, and that's a great point. And on our specific jobs, every person in the company uses it multiple times a day. That's for sure. But Bezos, I think it's Bezos who said that, you need to focus on what makes your beer taste better. And he was saying this in order to sell AWS, right? You don't want to own your own servers and so on. On our end, we had built been building our infrastructure, and we just had in our roadmap, figuring out the way to build our own LLM, and then OpenAI came out, and now there's a lot of different solutions, open source, closed source, and so on, that are made available. So it felt like we were building the factory, and that someone knocked on our door saying they were going to install the electricity next week, right? So we jumped into it right away. I think that my professional perspective on this is that the most value is going to be captured on the AI front with the organizations that are going to be able to generate outcomes for specific use cases. And so I think that the AI side of things has been quite commodified rapidly, and it's very hard now to see who are going to be the winners outside of the existing incumbents like Microsoft and Google. But it's the organizations that are able to capture the merchants' credit cards because you generate value for them directly that are going to be able to perform long term. So that's exactly where we end up being positioned to. So I'm quite excited for where we are.
So when it first came out, or when it started to be introduced into the world of work or businesses, OneLocal didn't really have any sort of fear that it would replace what you do. It kind of, you were able to use it and work with it.
Absolutely. 100%. And I think that's what companies should take away from this. We should be excited for it. We should integrate it as much as possible. At the individual level, one of the quotes I like is, your job is not going to be replaced by AI. Your job is going to be replaced by someone who learned how to use AI. And back when I was working at L'Oreal, I used to work closely to the creative studio that used to do that did the product design and so on. And they used to tell me that in the 80s, they used to take a blank bottle of shampoo and they would draw the new label on it. And they had like drawing skills back then, right? And you had to have that for you to do your job. And over time, they ended up using Photoshop, right? And, their skills just got transferred. And as of right now, I can pull Canva, Photoshop, and I can leverage prompts by writing text to achieve similar objectives. So I think that the trend we're observing is just similar to what we've seen in the past. It just feels new, but it's really the embracing of that. A friend of mine is a photographer, and whenever it came out, he wasn't worried for his job. He started trying literally hundreds of those AI tools to generate pictures and tweak them and test them out. And he would update his LinkedIn with his findings. And I think that now he's able to generate the same revenue he was generating before by using AI. And I think that's just the future of how things are going to be. And the ones that are not going to adapt to it will, end up stuck in the past. And it's going to be very hard for them to make up for it down the road.
From robots to humans, you say you are passionate about working with people. So how do you find the right people to work with in terms of, where do you what kind of atmosphere do you want to build?
So on finding the right people, there's some key indicators that someone is looking for that kind of a work environment. So we ask people around what kind of work environment they've worked in before, what they liked about it, what they didn't, and we try to find that hunger for doing more. If someone has worked for a startup and knows what to expect, it's a little bit more straightforward. If someone has been unsatisfied with working with a big corporation, that's another signal. But that intrinsic motivation, finding that hunger, that excitement, that accountability and ownership, they're all things that we're looking for someone to be able to perform in that kind of environment.
And in your team, the teams that you work with, finance, people and culture, client implementation, security, and internal operations, I just wanted to know, is there one of those teams that you want to improve or you want to, make more efficient, and how are you going to go about that this year?
Yeah, and so our more recent structure involves us being kind of like a small PMO for the company. So we're tracking 100 plus initiatives. We have 40 of them that we plan on delivering by the end of Q1. And we want to be the agent for change within the organization. So a lot of small things need to change for us to make the leap that we want to do to achieve the next level of automation and outcome for our merchants. And so the way we look at this is to be either a project control office for our colleagues, or be the driver of that change if they don't necessarily have the bandwidth or the expertise to be able to run this. And going back to my childhood, I'm thinking like a scientist as much as I can. So we talk internally about running experiments and gathering inputs or data points to assess how our experiments are working, to determine if we should do a second version of it, put more time and effort into them, or actually go in a different direction. So that's something that impacts every different team that we're working with. Last week, we had a meeting around an opportunity we had to help our merchants rank higher. Within 48 hours, we had a small prototype up and running. We're putting it in the hands of our clients starting the end of it, actually next week. And so that's happening quite fast. If it works well, we're going to give it to the engineering team for them to productize this and go forward with it. So that's the kind of thing that we do that is quite exciting, that has a similar significant impact on the team, and that we're looking forward to building on.
Interesting. Just my final question then, more general one. If you could shadow any CEO or work in any company for a few weeks, not forever, just for a few weeks, which company would you choose and why?
It's a great question. You know what? I'm going to have to go with Elon Musk. It's quite fascinating. I recently read his biography, and I still have a hard time sizing the guy. So I'm quite curious about how he thinks, about how he works. It's quite fascinating, the extremes of personality that he's exhibiting, while also being able to generate such a performance culture. So on my end, I would never see myself saying anything remotely close to what he's saying. I would have a personal ethical problem with that. But at the end of the day, he's built several successful businesses in different industries, with the exception of Twitter, of course. But yeah, I would be fascinated to just observe how he works.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting to be a fly on the wall and see
Absolutely.
how he runs all those businesses. Brilliant. Well, I'll let you go. Thanks for your time today. Really appreciate it. And wish you all the best with OneLocal.
Thank you, Chris. Have a great day.